This is the Sweet Song Podcast where we unwrap your favorite songs. On this episode, HuDost, featuring Moksha, Sommer, and Jemal Hines. Hello and welcome to the Sweet Song Podcast. I'm Kristi Wooten, your host, and today I've got some very special guests that I can't wait to talk to about their latest record. It is HuDost, it is Moksha, Sommer, and Jemal Hines. Thank you both for coming on to my podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. It's called Sweet Song for a reason, and you guys have many of those sweet songs. And we'll get started really just jumping right in with your latest record, which I have here with me, The Monkey in the Crown.
Ooh,
Lovely
the vinyl version, too.
Lovely vinyl. And it's so funny. I mean, that's how I've always known your music, because you guys have sent me vinyl. I've purchased some things in the past, and that's how I listen to your music. So I love getting the full effect of the album art and the music. So we'll talk about the album art in a minute because that's very special and Moksha created that. But I want to just catch up with you guys. I know that, since Anthems of Home came out, it's been an interesting 3 years to say the least. But also for you, your parents, you had another child, you've been writing and recording and playing live through everything, the pandemic and all of these things that have happened. So what do you think your biggest growth point has been between The Monkey in the Crown and Anthems of Home, which was released in 2021, right?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's quite a journey in terms of the timeline of those two records. I mean, talk about growing pains. I think all artists, all musicians, and everyone, it's not fair to leave anyone out of this, have gone just through so much growing pains in the last years in terms of readjusting of how things even function, let alone on the creative side, what the creative process, what the songwriting process even looks like in the wake of everything that happened in COVID. I mean, I feel like people are still recovering from that whole time period. And as people who, this is on a different note, but as people who tour and play a lot of festivals, a huge amount of our tour season is festivals through the spring, summer, and fall. And we've been really lucky to remain active with that. But since COVID, so many festivals have had to shut down too. So things are just functioning really differently. But on a personal note, we already had an older kid and now we have a little dude named Sylvan who's become part of our world too, in between those two albums. And that's always this beautiful readjustment. It's like positive growing pains with that kind of thing. And we're crazy people that now have a preteen and a toddler at the same time in our lives, which is not for the faint of heart. And I think one of the things that having kids in the first place, and I'll let Jemal chime in on this too, but when we had our older son, it really changed our view of the world too, in that it wasn't just about what we were experiencing, but it was also about what was going to be happening and what was happening around us politically, environmentally, on various fronts, and what that's going to mean for our children. And the nature of our songwriting has changed a lot since having children. And we sort of inevitably, especially in these last few records that we've written, we inevitably confront social issues that we're facing as a family. And so the new album has things like a song about what it's like to have a child in the public school system with all the shootings that are happening. There are a few different songs. There's one that looks at some of the environmental issues that have been rearing their heads for many decades now, but are being unavoidable in terms of being addressed at this point. So Jemal, anything you want to add to that?
You seem to cover it pretty well. It's also when we started, when Caleb came along, that's when we started, getting directly involved with the One campaign. Instead of thinking just our music was so positive enough that that's changing the world, that wasn't enough. So, we've gotten involved in a lot more. Always been involved in some level, but more actively involved. I never thought I would do lobby work, in my teens or 20s, so having kids changed that for sure.
Well, I want to have two follow-up questions on that. One of the things is, how do creative people make the time, not only with parenthood, but also if you're doing activism or if you're contributing to your community, which I know you all do, and I want to talk about that. I think that's a very special aspect of your work and who you are as people. But how do you find the time to create in an unforced way? I know that I've been struggling with that as a writer, especially since the pandemic and then the work from home, but work in the office, and then the cacophony of things that are happening in the world. You not only found time to do the beautiful cover art, but put out these songs as well. And really, 3 years is not a long time to make an album. Maybe back in the old days it was, but now it feels like time has this weird quality where you can't get anything done.
Well, that's one thing about COVID is that we did have time, you know, to just work. And our son was at an age where he, didn't need full on attention all the time. So, not only did we do Anthems of Home, we did, 14 song cover song record during COVID as well, which was super fun to do. And so, was able to really get in and focus. But now with this record, with having a 1 year old and a 2 year old, when we were making Monkey in the Crown, it was definitely like, we've got an hour and 20 minutes, run upstairs and try to get into a creative space in a small amount of time. It's not the ideal way to work, but you kind of have to, you know, shift that. Because used to, I would just stay up till 3, 4 in the morning and just get totally immersed in the audio world. You got to find a different way to approach it.
I'll just say that it's not easy. You know what I mean? That's the honest answer is it's not easy. But I think we both are the kind of people that don't know how to not be creative, don't know how to not be musicians, artists, etc. So it's more a
We're
thing
lifers.
of yeah, it's not a thing of like, are we gonna do it? It's a question of how are we gonna do it? I'll just say, just to give you sort of like a visual, reference or metaphor for this, creatively in terms of as an artist, I need to be making work too. And I have over the years often worked large, like making bigger pieces, whether it's large two-dimensional work or large three-dimensional work. Having a little kid, that's like completely impossible. I can't go out to my studio and just be gone for hours and immersed. I can't bring that work into the house or it will literally be destroyed. So I have like adjusted by figuring out okay, what do I do to become more refined in my practice as a visual artist who works smaller, right? And so all of the work, for example, for this album, it's all within a like 12 by 12, in terms of, yeah, 12 by 12 size, but I've done a whole bunch of these works, right? So I think that's the same
This
is
one's in
true
the
with me.
studio.
Yeah, there you go. So
That's
another small.
awesome.
That's the one of
So I've
me.
done just much smaller artwork. And it's actually pushed me to learn how to even do that, like how to even say more in a smaller space. And I think that's true with the songwriting process too. Like I think about sometimes I try to remember what it was like before we had kids and we thought our time was so full and we had so much on our plates, quote unquote. And I'm like, what was it like when we were writing music then? And I know we would just take all this time. And now we're like, we just have this window. So we just have to be focused. And it doesn't mean there's not still music playing going on a regular basis, but the songwriting and crafting time period is different than the just playing music time period. So if that answers your question, it's not easy.
I
I
love
think
what you
it's
said, making it work within a smaller space, whether it's an actual measurement, for example, for art. I can totally relate. I am not as active as you are with my visual art side, but I am a painter and I do create works. And I'm usually like going to find or stretch the 36 by 48 canvas, that's small to me. And I'm like, now I'm just going to get the watercolor sketch pad and put it in a 5 by 7. There's something about focusing on
mm,
such a small space that really kind of brings your vision in and makes it very potent. So I don't know, Jamal, did that happen kind of with the musical part of this as well? Just kind of feeling like whether it was being confined by, just constraints during the day, or was there any kind of focus like that with trying to make the sound kind of similar to what Moksha's done with her paintings?
Maybe. I mean, I kind of miss being able to immerse myself more. So, I mean, it's a hard question to answer, really. 'Cause it seemed like to me, it felt like it took a long time, and we just had these pool of whatever 10 songs, and that we worked on those for the entire time. So, I mean, looking back at it, I'm like, that took a long time just for those pieces. I'm so into them while I'm working on them, and as soon as they're done and out, I don't listen to them for a long time.
Yeah.
Or if I do happen to have them come on, I'm like, it's interesting, but it's hard to have a objectivity personally.
Well, I wanted to specifically ask about a few songs. I mean, I have found myself listening to this record not only to learn more about it and you, but to learn more about me. I was looking at your material in other spaces and noticed on your Spotify that "Take It Back" is now your number 1 played song on Spotify. I didn't know if you knew that or you keep up with that, but I thought that was interesting, and there's so many things about that song. I mean, I think the choral harmonies at the layered vocals, I presume, at the top, and it just has such a healing feeling, and to me, it was a little bit of a double entendre. It's kinda like, take it back, like you take it back, or you take it back, like your own life and your own space and all of that. So I may be way off. Songs are what the listeners imagine that they are, but you tell me what you think.
No, you're right on with that. And it's so interesting to me that that song has, spoken to people. To me, that's probably the most personal song on the record, the most honest and personal song on the record. And
We weren't even
it's
gonna put it on there
exactly,
though,
yeah,
right? Well, that was
yeah,
like one of the ones we were like, "Well, it's kinda nice when like," and actually Matt Oddmark from Jars of Clay, when we were sending him a lot of the demos, he was like, "This is the one I wanna work on." We worked on other stuff with him, but that was the one he singled out and went in there and chopped it down, and he came up with the idea of us, instead of going people like the Stevie Wonder half step jump at the end, we actually do a whole step jump at the end.
yeah.
And then he brought Chris Powell, the drummer, Brandy Carlisle's drummer, in, and just once that particular just super pocket groove came in, that's when that we were like, man, that's got, it's so laid back. But what were you going to say, Moksha? Sorry.
Well, it's just interesting to me because I think often, Jamal does a lot in terms of like the production arrangement. I do the bulk of the writing side of it. And I often write things that the ones that feel most personal to me, I have this hesitation where I'm like, oh, nobody's going to relate to this. Like, that's just my own thing. And often those are the ones that people really, when am like, okay, yeah, we will put this one out. Those are often the ones that people relate to the most, and we have to sort of not for I think it can feel to me, gosh, I'm so Canadian and I'm so like, well, I don't want to be narcissistic or put something out that's all about me. You know what I mean? And the reality is it's not if it's in the language that other people can also feel. Cause as humans, we so often have similar stories and similar experiences that can feel really personal, but are the kind of things that everybody has known or can relate to. So I think that's one of the things that songwriting can communicate.
One of the things that I wrote down when I was writing down my questions were actually about questions. I feel like most of your songs are based on questioning, like a questioning of yourself, a questioning of the spiritual realm, questioning of society. And I think that's what people can relate to as well. This idea that the universe is nothing if not a bunch of questions. And we're all here just trying to figure out, what the answer is. But I wanted to go ahead now and skip to Age of Indifference. And, one of the things that I love best about this song is the guitar solo, at the end. And I think I'm getting the track right. That's the one with the sort of epic, nice guitar sounds at the end.
Hmm.
But that also is the one that references the monkey in the ground, right? So can you tell me about kind of the lyrics of the meaning of that. Obviously, all metaphors are open for interpretation, but
That, yeah, that's definitely one of the more collaborative. I mean, they're all collaborative, but in terms of the song structure, that whole end section. I mean, I kind of borrowed a couple of ideas for that end section from other songs, which everything does. But but yeah, we wanted it to be this kind of grandiose, epic. We had gang vocals going on, but that guitar solo was just like at the beginning when we just did the demo, I did two takes of a guitar solo and edited the best of the two of them together. And I had the plans all along to go back and redo it, and I never did because I just always grew to like that what happened in those
Well,
two
also
takes.
because I
So
was like, don't touch it. It's good. Just leave it.
yeah,
Yeah. I'll share about the lyrics with it. I mean, the whole concept of the monkey and the crown, it came through in that song in terms of just that idea. But the whole concept of the monkey and the crown is a sort of like an idea that's two sides of the same coin, where on the one side, it is the whole thing of the idiot in royal clothing, like the person who should not be viewed the way they are, which is a lot of what we're seeing right now, politically, especially. And then the other side of it is the kind of the complete opposite, where it's the unexpected hero, the person you wouldn't think should be in those clothes, but they're the right clothes for that, so which is sort of more like who Hanuman is, right? That concept of the surprising noble. And so I think as a metaphor, though, I was sort of kept thinking about it, especially in terms of the political. But the reality is, every day we have the choice of like, are we which side of the coin are we going to be? Are we going surprising hero, the humble surprising hero, or are we going to be the one pretending to be royal who is not? And so that's what that song is about in essence, too. But I sort of thought it was just something we're all kind of contemplating socially these days, whether we are doing it consciously or unconsciously.
one of the things I want to get to is your sound. So for folks who may be listening who don't know your music and are about to check it out, it's listed as, oh, it's Americana, it's rock, it's folk, it's all these things. And to me, I've always honed in on the multicultural aspect of it, feeling right at home with music from other countries or other cultures. There's an element of that about it as well that I've always liked. And I know that that's may not be intentional. I know some of that may come from things that you all are exposed to when you do play these really interesting festivals that or some of them are not in the mainstream. And I think people would be interested to know kind of on your musical journey, if you can sum it up, if you can sum it up briefly, what you picked up along the way. What are the three most important things you picked up along your journey so far as songwriters? It could be a feeling or a musical trick or something that you definitely realize you don't want to have in your music, but what are three things you picked up along the way?
Well, I feel like Jemal can add into this too, but a couple really key things that pop into my mind right away are collaboration and non-attachment as songwriters. I mean, in terms of our musical history, we come from really interestingly different musical history, and Jamal may want to add, but I had a lot of especially education in Eastern European music, and we've both traveled a lot and been able to study with amazing musicians, but also collaborate with amazing musicians from different locations. And there's a lot of just amazing learning that's happened through that. And also, we love the album that we're working on right now that Jamal can share about too, is one where we're actually inviting musicians from different locations to act as guests in a bunch of our songs too. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
from different
collaboration.
faith traditions, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
different faith traditions.
We're
Yep.
doing like a collaborative interfaith record that hopefully is not going to come off as religious, but more of a, it's all one kind of thing, but not in a hippie kind of way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
People of the
Yeah,
That'd be the
world.
perfect balance.
not in the diminishing cliche version of that, but
Yeah, like
um,
actual collaboration.
You want to tell me a little bit more about what you have, or is that too far in the future with it?
It's not that far in the future. But like she was saying, she came singing vocal ensembles, Balkan, Bulgarian ensembles, and studied voice in India and Turkey. And I grew up playing punk rock in the late '80s in Gainesville, and then started following the Grateful Dead around, and then started becoming a drummer and playing with Middle Eastern ensembles, and some world music studies and stuff. And then it kind of turned into psychedelic rock. So it's kind of a strange blend of it all. So even with the World Interfaith Project, it will have all of those elements. But yeah, you can talk more about it, Moksha. I mean, might as well talk about it. It's happening.
yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a little bit of a deviation from your question, but it kind of still relates to, I still haven't figured out the third most important thing yet. But in terms of those things
Rhythm.
of collab and non-attachment, so just to give a tiny bit of history for this record, we both are actually ordained as interfaith ministers who are able to lead the universal worship, which is a tradition created over 100 years ago by Hazrat Nayat Khan, who was he was the first person to bring Sufism to the West too, is from India. And in terms of a long story short, he created this tradition. The whole point was to give equal homage to all of the different faiths through this service. And the approach that we're doing, we're not trying to replicate that, even though we are trained in it, we're ordained in it. But what we're trying to do is create that feeling, but just through music, so that people can simply tap into that kind of an homage. And we're also collaborating with people from each of the faiths who are also musicians, as a way to do that. And so we have some just wonderful, I won't do announcements of who's joining us on there yet, but it's just some really wonderful collaborations that are in the works right now for it too. And we've also kind of updated like what is being honored too in there, to be as current as possible as well. So that's a long answer to that. But overall, I'll just say in terms of collaboration alone, whether it's as a songwriter or in this kind of capacity, I personally think it's just such an environment of learning and ideally co-empowerment too, where you just learn so much through each other in terms of what your process even is, or like, how do you approach this? And the non-attachment part was, especially like as early when we were earlier on in our careers as songwriting, there's so much more attachment. And I think that's part of just what happens with time. And the more you do stuff, you kind of go like, who cares? Let's just do whatever serves the music the most. There doesn't have to be any ego involved in it. And when that tipping point happened for me in my career, it was such a liberation. Do you have the third answer, Jamal? What's the
I said
third most?
rhythm.
That's a good one.
I think you gotta have rhythm, or you don't have you can't move forward, right?
Yeah. I was thinking when she was talking about the world music stuff and all the different polyrhythms and different, time signatures that we kind of do, and we kind of, create things. That's how Fire of Eden was kind of created out of a rhythmic idea.
Mhm.
We've kind of, been writing more from that first sometimes, but it's a new element of it.
I want to ask you about where you live, because you are not in LA or London or Toronto or wherever it is that people make records most nowadays, or Atlanta or wherever. You are in Kentucky, and you all are part of a community that you really enjoy, and that has fed your activism with the One campaign, and it sounds like with this Interfaith Project and other things that you do. Can you talk a little bit about being kind of an artist who is also committed to their local community?
Yeah, well, I will give a disclaimer that we're close to Nashville. So there is the reality of, being close to a big music city, which is great, which is a very positive. But we're definitely out in the country. Do you want to share about this, Jamal, in terms of this community around us?
Well, there's a historical marker right in front of my brother's house across the road that says birthplace of the Hines. So this is where my parents and my grandparents and everybody grew up here in Butler County, Kentucky. So, but like she said, we are, it's a good hub to have, and we have our little studio here. And, there is a great, especially the closest town is Bowling Green, Kentucky, where we live, which has, a good record store, which is always essential, you know, vinyl store. Of course, that's all there is these days, but it's just, yeah, a good community of folks. And we're involved not only in the, we're the Kentucky reps for the One campaign. So in Bowling Green, we have our local congressman's there. One of our senators lives there. And, we also work with the Kentucky branch of the Poor People's Campaign. And there's just a whole, crew of really good people when it comes down to needing to get actions done or something, both here in Butler County and in Bowling Green. So it's nice to.
I do feel like I need to be honest, though, and just say that, especially with having a little one come into our lives, we've definitely been more on the back burner these last couple of years, just sort of juggling everything. And we're actually just feeling now like we're in a place where we're able to kind of start getting back out. We've continued with all of it, but you know what I mean? Things have to wax and wane as we go through different times and when there are different priorities.
Yeah, it's hard to go to a rally right now.
It is. It's hard. Yeah. But we do feel like we can, especially now, we're like, okay, we can start doing more, even though he's still a little tiny dude, but it just is more possible the older he gets with it. And I mean, I think that's one of the things that's really important about being surrounded by community, though, too, is that everyone is going to go through these different times. And that's part of what community does is the continuation and the holding of what needs to be done, and just knowing that you have each other's backs. When you can, you step up and take on more. When you can't, it's okay to let go for a little bit. And I think that's sometimes what's missing in other systems that may be more established and formal, like, even something like a nonprofit organization that has a whole structure to it, as opposed to how things actually are supported within the community for that, you know? So anyway, we're slowly moving back in.
Well, I mean, obviously you're doing it through your music as well. And that brings us to like acting out the outrage and Broken Down in America and just some things that can speak to people musically. And of course, acting out the outrage, that to me was kind of like, it was like a follow up to, Our Words Will Be Louder. I felt like it was, the sister song to that. Can you talk about the
Yeah.
writing of that one?
Both of those songs, we co-wrote with Dan from Jars of Clay, who we've done some co-writing with on the last few records. And we get together and we're just like, let's write something lighter this time. Let's, do a love ballad or something. And then we start talking about politics, and that's what the songwriting becomes. Acting out the outrage, the whole ban on drag had just happened in Tennessee. And we got together with him, in Nashville, which is where he's based. And we just kept talking about it. And it was so disturbing to us that what kept kind of coming up for us was the whole thing of, especially on social media, people needing to get up on soapboxes and talk about issues that are not theirs to talk about because they have nothing to do with their own lives. And we were like, how many of these people who are raging about this have ever hung out with a drag queen? Right? Like how, or let alone had a conversation, or anything, or even been to a drag show, So it was
Yet they
that thing.
probably watched Milton Berle or Bob Hope back when and didn't think twice about it. Sorry
Yeah. I mean,
for that.
and we basically that was the inspiration for that song, but became about more than just the ban on drag. It became the thing about that very thing of like how all issues seem to be confronted these days, where what we really have to do is get off the soapboxes, get out from behind social media, be in our communities and be hearing the stories of people around us directly with eye contact involved. Because there's such disgusting belittling that happens on especially social media. And the thing of like, you don't know this person, so you're just going to treat them like they're nothing or make a mockery of what their lives are. And we got to play that song just last week at Americana Fest with Flamey Grant, if you know Flamey Grant. She's amazing, just an incredible voice, drag queen who's a killer musician. And so she guested.
She's a Christian drag queen, and her idol was Amy Grant, so she has called herself Flamey Grant.
Yeah, check her
So
out
she's
if
a
you don't know
heathen
her.
like us, you know.
I love that. And, with Broken Down in America too, I kept thinking, like, how do we bring people together? If we bring people together through music, how do we do that? Do we give them enough to think about that it forces them to kind of face what's happening? Or, do you coddle people? Because you're right. There's so many things that are happening on social media where people just feel the negativity in their faces all the time. And if you hit somebody like that with something, they're not going to respond in a favorable way. So how do you make sure that your message stays within palatable is not the right word because that sounds like it's not edgy, but how do you make it become responsive for the listener, especially with songs that are about what's happening in the world right now?
Well, Broken Down in America, what was really important to us was writing it from the perspective that we're actually living as parents with kids in school and what it is to send them off each day, right? And what that feels like. And, I think people can argue over the gun laws. I think there's a lot that people just become completely blindsided with, but anyone who is a parent with a child can relate to that fear. So that's what that song addresses. And it's from that perspective. I think a lot of things we have to just write from the perspective that we actually know, because again, it's like what we were talking about earlier. It's what other people can truly relate to as well.
And
What song?
we kind of purposely made it, upbeat to kind of convey the message and a little poppy to do it, and even though the verse lyrics are pretty intense, you know, the "Hey there, son, it's Monday morning, use your teacher like a human shield," but then by the time you get to the chorus, there's a bit of a disarmingness of the only arms I bear are here and open. So, I think a lot of good music in general, some of my favorite music does that, like, Tears for Fears is a good example of that. They can have some really heavy subject matter, but then they disarm you with the heart stuff, and then you're like, you can't help but be feeling it toward the end of the song. So there's a transformation that hopefully happens.
What song do you guys wish you had written, each of you? Could be anything from any time period.
Well,
Oh,
I've actually I've made that thought before, but I can't think exactly. Woman in
that's a
Chains is a
great.
great song.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of that because I just mentioned Tears for Fears, but that's one of those songs. That's like one of those perfect songs, in my humble opinion.
There are so many good songs. One of the ones that pops into my brain is actually there are a few Arcade Fire songs that I have just so many
Yeah,
times listened to and been like, that is such a brilliant song. And I've learned a lot just from that songwriting of actually a sort of really interesting complexity and simplicity as a combination in them. So My Body is a Cage, I think, is like mind blowing as a song. But that whole
that
album.
more recently that Boy Genius song, always an angel, never a god. That song. I forget what it's called.
I love that song.
That is such
Yeah.
a good song.
It's the harmonies and some of the chord changes at the end and just the texture of their different voices together, and it just gets you at the end of that
Yeah,
song.
and they wear their
Yeah.
influences on their sleeve too. You can hear the Cure in there. You can hear a little, you know, Springsteen in there. I mean, that's why I like Arcade Fire too, is because they're
That was
unashamed to wear their influences on their sleeves.
The Boy Genius song was my favorite of whatever year it came out, but it's so hard to remember anything. We have like short-term, long-term memory, and we're missing the middle now because I think that's like erased by algorithms or politics or something.
I know
You're
Yeah.
looking it up.
my
What
whole
is the
life,
name of the song?
my whole life
That's
has
one of the
been
things AI is doing to thought processes too.
my whole life, yeah, up until a certain point was arranged. I could remember every year from like I was born in 1970, and I remember that Osmonds record when they're all sitting in that dirt pit. It was like that's my 1970 record, and then Elton John is like my 72, and I can remember everything up until probably around somewhere in the 94. I think things just started going off the rails, and I can't remember sometimes which years records come out.
Yeah, it's like the internet. So it's called Not Strong Enough.
Yes,
Yes, 2023. So it was my favorite record of that year. I loved that,
fantastic.
even though I couldn't remember the name of it just now. But that's one of those things. You can't remember the name of a song title or album title or the year, but once you hear that first note, you can sing every syllable of everything that
Yeah.
you hear. I love that music has that connections with memories. All right, our final question is, what is your sweet song? So it could really mean anything for you. It could be your truly favorite song that you've written. We prefer if it's one that you all have written or recorded, but it could be from any time period for any reason.
Hmm.
Our song, I like either Benevolence Day or Home is Bigger Than Us from the last two records, but I'm trying to think of Moksha can answer while I try to think of someone else's sweet song.
Yeah, I love
I'm
both
looking
of
at my
those songs.
records right now.
Actually, but I will share, like, this is sort of a different perspective, but from the album we're working on now, we're doing a redo of a piece that was one of the very first pieces we played together live. And we've done it almost every concert. So we're talking like probably thousands of times at this point since then, because to me it's not just a song but also like a practice, and it's actually music set to the first verse of Rumi's Mathnavi, the Persian poet Rumi from the 13th century. And it's about, I won't give you the entire translation of it, but it's about the longing to return to the source. It's changed so much for me over the years of doing it, not just as I said, not just as a song, but as a practice. And it's deepened, and it's how I experience it has changed too. So it's, I don't know if that fits exactly the answer that you were looking for, but it's a really fascinating thing. I think it can happen probably with any song that you treat that way too, where it becomes something living that grows and changes and is beyond what it started out as.
I always say that songs are for like old friends and or new friends. They're just like friends. And sometimes you're hanging out with them all the time and you guys are getting along. Sometimes, you go years and you just haven't spoken very much. Or sometimes you want to revisit and you realize, that maybe the recording hasn't changed, but the song, the meaning has changed. There's something about it that is deeper to you now. So I always say that about songs. So I really liked your answer because I haven't had anyone yet say anything like that, which is kind of the revisitation of something that they've done, over time. So that was really great.
I think I know what possibly my all-time favorite sweet song would be That's the Way of the World by Earth, Wind and Fire. I always love that song, and it's always whenever it comes on or is played, it's perfect. So that's one of my faves.
I love that. And I love Keep Your Head to the Sky and
Yeah,
things that they did. It's kind of that
they're my favorite band, but that song is, yeah, I love it. And then there's
they've all
Prince too.
Yay, Prince. Earth, Wind and Fire always has that, spirit element in everything that they do too. But it certainly didn't get away from them having, mainstream pop hits and biggest roller skating songs of all time.
Yeah, that's true.
This is one of my
Yep.
main memories of the Gotta Have Fun and Boogie Wonderland. Well, thank you both so much for this. It's amazing. I'm glad you were able to spend some time this afternoon. I really appreciate it.